temporarily secret. That could be a surprise gift for your friend. It could be an engagement ring, or it could be divorce papers. And some of the things that we want to buy need to be permanently secret. If you look at a blogger in North Korea that's blogging about the regime there, and he's relying on tips through the internet to get his living, he needs to have a very high level of financial privacy. I think that this basic financial issue with Bitcoin has the potential to kind of blow up in the next couple of years. And the way that I see that happening is there's going to be some kind of website, something like whatmyexbuys.com, where some creep, he goes to the website, he enters his ex-girlfriend's Bitcoin address, and starts giving him a list of people that she's been doing business with, think stuff that she's been buying from companies potentially, and he get kind of nasty. The last reason that's to do with basic financial privacy is around theft. When you fully disclose your finances, you invite theft. In the same way that you probably would not want to take your bank account balance or all the things that you have in your apartment that are really worth a lot of money, load up on a big sign and put it outside your house. You don't want to do this with Bitcoin, and yet we have something that's sort of like that with Bitcoin right now with this very open ledger. Now, that's the pragmatic reason why we should care about this stuff. Now, to the more ideological reasons. It has to do with government censorship of money. Fundamentally, governments cannot be trusted to fairly censor money. They don't have a good track record. So just a few things in this area. Governments steal from people. We look at the example of the two big to fail banks. We had bailouts in the US where the US is basically stealing from people that haven't been born yet, right? We have bail-ins in countries like Cyprus where they literally reach into people's savings accounts, take a handful out without their permission. Governments are also very hypocritical enforcing laws in this area. If you look at the two big to jail banks like HSBC, who was giving out a little slap on the wrist and a fine for laundering millions of dollars for violent drug cartels. That's not a courtesy that's extended to people in the Bitcoin community, obviously. Laws also tend to be quite often nebulous and kind of arbitrary. There was a law professor a few years ago who said basically there's not a single person in the United States that's over the age of 18 years who could not be indicted for some federal crime. That's kind of scary. There were 40,000 new federal laws passed in 2013 alone, and the total number of federal laws is essentially uncountable. There's been a number of law organizations that have tried to count it, and they gave up because they couldn't do it. We also have a pretty significant amount of perjury by police officers in the courts, which really calls into question the meaning of truth and evidence in the court system. So in other words, I think that although most of us will absolutely never go to jail, it kind of could happen to any one of us. It's a risk that's posed to citizens all over the world. Governments also have a very bad history of abusing capital controls and surveillance of money. So let's look at a regime that I think everyone can pretty much agree was not very good, the Nazi regime. So in 1918, Germany passed what's called the Law Against Tax Evasion to make sure that everyone's paying their fair share. Right? And then a few years later, in 1931, they passed the Reichsflight tax, which is basically saying to the Jews, look, we can't stop you from fleeing the country for your lives, but if you do, we can make sure that we keep your money on your way out. Now imagine someone in 2014 saying to you, well, look, the Nazi law enforcement absolutely needed these tools to make sure that people were obeying the laws. That would be obviously a pretty ludicrous and evil statement. And so these kinds of reasons are why we need to avoid these kind of tracks to do with privacy and surveillance. People say, well, I've got nothing to hide and so forth. But really, you do have some risk. And even if you don't, you're kind of throwing other innocent people under the bus when you say that. For a very good piece on that, read Daniel J. Solal's I've Got Nothing to Hide and Other Misunderstandings of Privacy. So censorship technologies can be used by both good and bad people, and we can't really stop the bad people from using the things that are available to the good ones. I think the solution is to separate state and money, and I think that Bitcoin has the potential to make that happen. So how do we fix these issues with blockchain? Fundamentally, it comes down to transaction anonymity. We have right now a state of opt-in privacy with Bitcoin. We have things like mixing services where you can put your Bitcoins through a mixer, you get them out, they're sort of anonymized. But the problem with opt-in privacy, which we know from other areas of technology, is is that you get very low participation. People simply will not participate in the systems. And everyone else is surveilled. And it creates a problem for anonymity, because anonymity is all about participation. Anonymity is how many people can I be mistaken for? And if you have low participation, it's not very random. It also makes fungibility eroding efforts like coin validation much easier. If you care about Bitcoin at all, you should be very, very concerned about things like coin validation. What we would much prefer to have is opting out privacy, right? If you want to fully disclose your stuff, you can, but the default is that you're not disclosing them. The way that we can make that happen, we can make changes to the Bitcoin protocol. A lot of people have heard of the 0 coin proposal. We can also do other things. There's disposable and derived addresses, extended public keys, and so forth. That's just some tech talk about that. We can also make changes to Bitcoin clients. Some things that have come up in that space recently are stealth addresses, which sounds really scary, but it's actually just a financial privacy. And we also have decentralized peer-to-peer mixers, which have to be both trustless and blind. If you want to understand what that means, ask me about that in Q&A or check out my book. Even if we solve all of the issues with the blockchain, we're still going to have to deal with off-chain attacks on financial privacy. So we're talking about side channels, and a side channel in the context of Bitcoin privacy is something that reveals information about the transaction participants that's not on the blockchain. So for instance, when you're using Bitcoin, internet messages are going back and forth. It could be the IP addresses of the people sending these packets. And if we have an attacker that's doing something like logging all internet traffic, and we have an attacker like that, they're called the NSA, they have the prison program and other programs, then that's a huge challenge to financial privacy. The way that we can combat that is by using privacy networks like Tor and I2P and so forth. They help by hiding the geographic origins of internet traffic that's going around. We also need to do a better job of helping people out with operational security, though, and managing their identities on the internet. For example, if you're using Tor and you log into Facebook, and then you check the balance of your Bitcoin address on blockchain.info, someone that's logging all the internet traffic, even though you're using Tor, is going to have a very easy time matching your identity to your Bitcoin address. We also need to do a better job of helping people manage addresses. Earlier I talked about Alice, how she might have these 3 Bitcoin addresses pooled together, and her Bitcoin client's not really asking her if she wants that to happen. It's something that happens behind the scenes. It's kind of too late after the fact. So we need to do a better job of that. There's an effort called Point Control that should be coming to Bitcoin clients pretty soon that will help out with that. And it's really important that we incorporate all of these technologies directly into Bitcoin clients to make them easy for people, because if they're complicated and hard, then only power users will use them. All right, so conclusions, starting with just the basic financial privacy stuff. Right now, Bitcoin protocol, Bitcoin clients are designed so that only the power users have any kind of decent privacy. The status quo is not very good for the people who are not power users. They don't have good privacy from people that are doing business with, or from people that are data mining the blockchain. And I don't think that status quo is acceptable. The good news is that Bitcoin absolutely can be extended to have not only financial privacy that's on par with the legacy banking system, but far better than what we had before. A critical component of that is going to be anonymizing Bitcoin addresses and Bitcoin transactions as much as possible. And there's still this open problem that we have to figure out, where if we're not going to change the Bitcoin protocol, how do we protect the privacy of the billions of limited feature phone users that are going to be coming into the Bitcoin ecosystem in the near future? They have these quote-unquote dumb phones that are not necessarily going to be able to connect to the Tor network, not necessarily going to be participating in peer-to-peer decentralized mixing and so forth. So we still need to figure out how we're going to protect those folks. And finally, conclusions for freedom. Right? So I think that right now we have an amazing opportunity for achieving better freedom in the world by using Bitcoin. The way that we do that is we help spread Bitcoin even further, and we figure out some of this privacy stuff and improve the anonymity on the Bitcoin network that people can have. And in doing so, we're not going to be just ending the Fed, we're going to be ignoring the Fed or tunneling underneath it. The way that you can help make this happen is you can be a leader as a software user. Let people know that you're demanding privacy features. Let them know that you want to have things like 0 coin in the Bitcoin protocol. want to have access to Tor and peer-to-peer mixers in your Bitcoin clients. If you see that there are people that are trying to develop this software in an open source fashion, be willing to crowdfund them if they need money to make it happen. And finally, if Bitcoin is going to be co-opted in the name of surveillance, you have to be willing to leave Bitcoin for some other altcoin, for Bitcoin 2.0, if it's absolutely necessary. So the good news is that I think there's an incredibly bright future for Bitcoin and for the world in terms of freedom. But it's only one of the possible futures that are out there. So we have to actually go out there and seize it. And I think these are some of the ways that we make that happen. So thank you very much. I'd love to hear your questions they may have about this or any related topics.
Thanks, Gustav. Any questions? Just raise your hand. I'll come right to you with the microphone. One over here.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really passionate about this topic. I'm not a developer, and so when you say let people know, who do I need to let know? I see this. I'm also pretty blind about the open source process by which code gets changed and who makes that commit. I don't understand any of that. So
Right.
Please tell me how that works.
That's a great question. So just to repeat it for anyone that didn't necessarily hear, basically the question is how can we make these things happen if we're not Bitcoin developers ourselves? So I think that, I mean, there's some simple like kind of stuff that we can do on the ground to let people know. Send emails out to people that you know that are developers. Send emails to the Bitcoin Foundation if necessary, or let the Bitcoin Foundation know, look, I'd like to donate to your cause, but I need to know first of all that you're really pushing these privacy technologies. Let me know what you're doing, and depending on what I hear back from you, I would be willing to send you a donation. So I think that voting with your wallet is a very effective means of making that happen. And not everything is going to be done by the Bitcoin developers, right? So there's a few people that are Bitcoin developers, and they have some internal process for merging all of the changes into the Bitcoin. It's kind of slow, but there's going to be stuff that happens outside of this area. Later on, I think Cody Wilson will be talking about Dark Wallet, which is an interesting topic in that area. I'm not really sure what's going to happen with Dark Wallet, but I like the intention there. And there's definitely ways that people can develop software that doesn't necessarily have to be merged directly into the Bitcoin client. And keep in mind, people are using all kinds of Bitcoin clients out there. One of the most popular ones is blockchain.info. And to their credit, they're taking the lead by taking things like CoinJoin and trying to implement it as a decentralized mixing service and making that an option in their wallet. I would actually like to see that become a default or something like that in the future for blockchain.info. So it's not all about the mainstream Bitcoin developers, but there's other ways of putting the pressure on it as well. So just, sending people like who you know that are working on this stuff, let them know, send them an email or whatever, and when you have opportunities to spend money, make sure that people know that it's going to be contingent on whether they're pushing forward these privacy technologies.